What's up? Hey everyone, what is going on? Welcome back to the Spoogly channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope your day is going fantastic. Well, it's probably about to get worse because you're about to be scared out of your mind. Because today I'm going to be exploring a fantastic new internet ARG analog horror series that honestly not enough people know about. It's kind of flying under the radar a little bit, and I'm going to be showing it to you today, explaining it all, and we're going to be exploring the depths of the Woodlands National Park. It's literally insane. What are we insane? If you enjoy eldritch horror, national parks from real life, cover-ups, getting paid off, massive entities in the woods, and weird, unnerving imagery, as well as some found footages, then this ARG is right up your alley. It's up mine too, so don't worry, it's not just you. And if you don't trust national parks in real life, then you're really gonna enjoy this video. Hopefully you enjoy. If you don't enjoy it, I'm sorry. With all that said and done, let's explore the depths of Woodlands National Park. So this series is split up into 8 different parts, and I'm going to be going through each of the videos in order, and I'll be explaining the timeline and all that stuff and putting my input and breaking down cryptic clues and everything like that. The typical breakdown video. I really hope you enjoy this. It's going to be awesome. If you have not seen the original yet from Buddy Films, the creator, go watch it first. Seriously, it is a fantastic watch through. It is seriously so entertaining, and I really enjoy this kind of thing, and I know you do too. If you're in this niche, you do. And they literally only have 15,000 subscribers. Seriously, they need to get pumped up to more because this is somehow flying under the radar of all the big YouTubers. So I'm hoping I can slide in here before Wendigoon gets his hands on it. Anyways, let's start with the first video of the series. The first log in this series is from 1975, and it is titled "The Most Dangerous National Park in the USA." 1975 found footage tape, Woodlands National Park. Kind of a mouthful. And in this 2-minute clip, we meet the main characters in our story. Park Ranger Alex and Park Ranger Steve. These two dudes. And these are the two homies that we will be exploring all of Woodlands National Park with. Get used to seeing their faces. I just dropped my phone. So yeah, get used to Alex and Steve. They are an integral part to the series. So the video opens up with Alex and Steve mentioning the name of the park they work for, Woodlands National Park, which they go on to say is actually located in a redacted place because the video cuts off before they say it, but it's actually in Washington, and we'll get into that later. So yeah, this Woodlands National Park is located somewhere in Washington, and Steve and Alex work there. Right on the screen, a Woodlands National Park pamphlet pops up, which gives us some more detail as to what's actually inside the park and the weird things that it encapsulates. The park information reads as follows. I'm just gonna go ahead and read the whole thing so I don't sound like a lunatic. Woodlands National Park was designated as a national monument in 1912 and made an official national park in 1939. The park contains many anomalous creatures, plants, and entities. So off the bat, we see that some crazy stuff's about to go down, because what kind of park puts that in a pamphlet? Also off the bat, we know that this place was officially recognized back in 1912 as a national monument, which I find pretty interesting that it took 27 years to signify it as a national park. Again, more on that later. But the park was officially named a national park back in 1939, and the story that we're watching takes place in 1975, so a little under 40 years later. And then the pamphlet briefly mentions some weird creatures that you might see, but I'm going to wait till the video that explains them all to explain them, because I don't want to jumble up your tiny brains yet. Just kidding, love y'all. Alex then tells us about visitor centers and park ranger locations that are sprinkled throughout the park, and in these locations you can find pamphlets and guides and videos that are informational and that kind of thing. Just your typical national park station. You need to keep in mind where these are. They might save your life one day. The video then cuts to a short clip of what looks like a Wendigo skull just jumping right in front of the camera. Right after this video footage, we move to a screen of a still image with the text, "He's standing right there," in the bottom left corner. Now, you can't really see anything standing there, and that's for good reason. That is an entity that you can't see. We'll talk about it later. In this first minute and a half, you kind of get the feeling of how really eldritch horror and scary this place is going to be. Alex then introduces us to what the other video logs are going to be about. Things like entities, weather, layout, and history of the Woodlands National Park. And he says that him and Steve are going to walk us all through the history and everything. And that is where the first entry video ends. This is a very good first part to a series. I think it really sets the tone for how things are going to be with these weird anomalous creatures everywhere and this just general distrust aura that's around Steve and Alex. It's very cool. And after watching the entire series like 4 or 5 times, you really get the hints that it drops in this first part. That's again why I recommend you watch the series just raw by itself. Yes, raw dog the series, please. And then come back and watch the video so that way you'll understand a little bit of the hints that they drop. I'll do my best to explain them in this video, but I can't promise that I'll catch everything. The next episode of the series is entitled Park Ranger Admits to the Existence of Wendigos, 1975 found footage, and is another 2-minute video, but this time it's Park Ranger Steve hosting it. Basically, he just outright says that Wendigos are a common thing to see while exploring Woodlands National Park. And then he describes what a Wendigo is. Now, I'm sure most of you know what a Wendigo is, but if you don't, I will link a full Lore Lodge video talking about it, because, again, Lore Lodge goes extremely into detail about the smallest little things, and I love it. So if you really want this dramatized, in-depth look into what Wendigos are and their history, check that out. Just know that it is an eldritch horror that gets to the way it is by eating a human and being a cannibal, and then it just stalks the woods to hunt other people. That's like the most broad, blank overview I can give. But anyways, Steve says, yeah, they're real and they're here, and we see them pretty often. Interestingly, he says in the middle of the video that a Wendigo is actually a Native American legend, then follows that sentence up by saying, which until recently we thought it was a legend. So this means that the Wendigos in the park have not always been there, or they weren't always documented as real entities. Weird. It's also not the best thing to hear when you're about to walk through a park alone. Steve claims that these Wendigos were proven to be real after some mishaps inside of the park. I'm sure you guys can guess what a mishap is. But if you can't, so someone got eaten by a Wendigo. It's not that hard. Catch up. Then the video cuts to Steve showing a cadaver right there on the floor and lifting up the blanket and looking underneath it. And he literally says, "There is no legs here," and then slams the tarp back down. Just listen to how he says it.
There is no legs here.
The way he said that has me dying for absolutely no reason at all. It's literally so stupid. After this, it cuts back to Steve, who then tells us how to survive a Wendigo encounter. The first point being to not run, because apparently they love it when you run, is what Steve says. A park pamphlet on how to survive a Wendigo then pops up on the screen, and it reads as follows. First discovered by the Native Americans in the northern regions of the US, the Wendigo is a flesh-eating monster. Has been observed running 45 miles an hour, or 72 kilometers per hour, who don't speak red, white, and blue. Then the pamphlet ends by telling you the only successful way to end a Wendigo. And to do that, you have to remove its heart. And that is lore accurate. That's how actual Wendigos are supposed to be killed. Now, you can actually defend yourself from a Wendigo without killing it by using a silver bullet or a silver-tipped blade or something like that, or even a silver arrow, and using silver will somehow weaken it. After this pamphlet, the video of Steve and his cameraman is abruptly interrupted by Steve saying, "It's time to run. Let's go. Let's get out of here." Because he sees a Wendigo. And of course, they start running away right after they told us to not run away. So it seems like they're not listening to their own advice. Anyways, the creature ends up catching the cameraman, who is named John, and it attacks him and eats him right there behind the camera. W in the chat for John the cameraman. He will come up a lot later in the story. He's an integral part to the Woodlands National Park, and it's pretty sad to see him go so early on in the series. Anyways, with John being consumed by a eldritch horror, that's where the video ends. On to video 3. So the next entry is entitled 45-foot tall cryptid in Woodlands National Park. And this, my friends, is where things get nice and juicy. Or it could be that I have an unhealthy addiction to learning more about lore. This video is hosted by Alex, and he opens by saying that the trail known as Dead Man's Trail is now closed due to there being a dead man on the trail. It's John. That trail that John was on is closed. So Alex claims that this video that's right now is being made in response to a recent uptick in sightings of an entity known as walkers. So walkers themselves seem to be geo-locked inside of Woodlands National Park's barriers. Like there's no more outside that have been seen. They are, geographically here in this exact park. Originally, most people believed this creature to be a ghost or an apparition of some sort, or somehow exist in the astral plane, and it wasn't a real flesh and blood creature, until we figured out that it was. The way they did this is that someone used a FLIR thermal camera at nighttime, and it saw the outline of the heat signal, because somehow this creature gives off a biological heat, even though you can't see it with your naked eye. So you might be asking yourself, how can you not see a 45-foot tall, huge creature with your eyes? That's actually an interesting thing. You see, the walkers are such a dark black color in their natural coloration that they absorb all the visible light spectrum around them, rendering them virtually invisible. So yeah, these walkers envelop all the visible light around them, and that's actually the creature that was in the first video inside the picture that said, he's standing right there. There was a walker in the picture, you just couldn't see it. Walkers can range anywhere from 12 to around 45 feet tall, and they have extremely long legs and arms in proportion to their body size. They also have another unique, really cryptic power that they have, where their bodies emit some kind of radio wave when they walk, or when they're just standing there. This effect will cause all the radios and speakers in the surrounding areas to play nothing but static. So if you're sitting around a campfire with your friends, listening to some music, and then you hear just like, static, a walker is nearby. And this is the only way to know they're nearby, because you can't see them with your naked eyeballs. Now, these static patterns have been analyzed, and nothing's come out of it, but it is theorized that that's how the walkers communicate with each other, or how they try to communicate with humans. Alex then goes into more safety measures on how to protect yourself from a impending walker attack, or if there's one near, or how to take precautions if you're going to be spending the night in the woods. The main one, he says, is to keep a campfire running all the time. Like literally 100% of the time, even through the night, like set an alarm to wake yourself up to put wood on the fire, because you have to keep the fire going. The fire is the best way to ward off any of the creatures here, especially the walker, because apparently they don't want to get near light sources, although we'll see later that that's not really true. But for now, just believe me. Yeah, and if you do hear static late at night from your speaker or your radio or your walkie-talkie, then you need to pick up the radio and you need to say, "Ranger, Ranger." That way you can kind of confirm that it's not a ranger trying to contact you on your radio. And if they don't reply, then it's a walker. But it's probably always going to be a walker, because I don't think a ranger is going to be hitting up your radio at 3 a.m. Then the third video concludes with a radio around the fire being interfered by a walker, which means there's a walker within a few feet distance of that fire. Now, video 4 of the series is where it starts to ramp itself up even more with difficulty and with the horror aspect. The video is entitled "Private Military Group Hunts Down Wendigo." That's right, folks, the SCP Foundation has got their grubby paws all over the Woodlands National Park. Just kidding. It's actually the Dyer Corporation. So the Dyer Corporation is kind of this shadow government entity that exists and knows about the national park. They have dispatched this private military group to go in and hunt down the Wendigo that sadly killed our favorite cameraman, John. The Dyer Company was called on June 3rd, 1975, and within 15 hours of John's passing, the Dyer Company sent out this military task force to hunt down the Wendigo. The force's name is Task Force Delta, and the team is made up of an expert tracker, 2 artillerymen with guns, and 1 cameraman. To be honest, I feel like they could have just strapped a GoPro to one of the gun guys. I don't think they should have brought a cameraman around. Anyways, it's in this video where we finally get to see our first map of the park. And on this specific map, we get to see where Dead Man's Trail is, where John's body was found, and a river running through the park. The video cuts to the task force trudging through the woods, and we see on the first day that nothing bad happens. It's just the dudes walking through the forest with their military outfit on. They set up camp, they spend the night there, and then the next morning, they wake up, and then they start walking closer to where John was found. That is until they come across a weird sight. They find an abandoned campsite 63 miles off of the nearest trail. Now, the entire reason this task force is in the woods this far is to avoid being seen and to go in stealthily. So why in the world is there a campsite 60 plus miles off the nearest trail? First of all, that's really weird. Don't know who would hike out that far, but whoever did in the story met a bad fate. They find a ripped apart tent with huge gashes in the side, they find blood all over the ground, and they find a bed of coals from a fire that are still warm, which means that they left not too long ago. As they're exploring this campsite that looks like it's been ravaged by some beast, it has, the darkness starts to come over, and then the sun starts to set. And right as the sun is setting, the group is set upon by a Wendigo. One of the officers, yells out that it's out in the woods. They take up formation, and they start to shoot blindly into the woods to try to scare it off, I guess. I don't know. The Wendigo attacks, throwing one of the dudes in the air far away, and then it proceeds to run around and try to get the other members of the group as well. The cameraman, hyperventilating, of course, hides in the tent that was already torn up, in hopes that the Wendigo doesn't see him and that it passes by. He's aiming his camera at a big gash in the tent, and then you can kind of see horns walking past that big gash, and it passes by the tent, and the cameraman is safe. No, he's not. For like 4 or 5 seconds, there's nothing, and then out of nowhere, the Wendigo reaches through the tent, tries to grab the cameraman, and he screams like a little girl, but somehow the cameraman evades the Wendigo and jumps out the back of the tent and starts running away into the woods. At this point, there's only 2 army guys left, so it's these 2 guys and the cameraman, and they're just sprinting through the woods trying to get away from this Wendigo. And the footage ends with these 2 dudes and the cameraman running away for their lives. We don't know if they escaped or not. I assume they did. That's how we got the recording, but they lost half their team. So the next entry begins with Park Ranger Alex and Steve expressing their sympathies for what happened to John. They loved John. They were really close. He worked there for 20 plus years, and he was kind of like this elder, almost like father figure to them. So losing him out like that, being attacked by a Wendigo, it hurt him pretty bad. And I kind of feel bad for him. I kind of do. And they mentioned that, like I said, John has worked at this park for over 20 years as a wildlife photographer, and his photos of these entities and creatures are some of the only ones that are available. So he's done this crazy job for 20 years and lasted this entire time doing it until he met his fate with the Wendigo. In the middle of them expressing their sympathies, Steve gets a radio call from a ranger at a nearby visitor center. And this ranger brings some pretty bad news. The ranger claims that John's wife is there and she's asking questions. So John's wife is named Nancy, and Nancy and John were really close. They've been together for a long time, and she knew that he was a wildlife photographer at the Woodlands National Park, and she knew that there was dangerous things there because John had told her. However, she thought it lasted 20 years. I'm sure it'll last for retirement. And that's why she's here barging in the door, asking questions, what's happened, why did it happen, you're covering this up, and that kind of thing. And obviously the park isn't going to say, sorry ma'am, your husband was murdered by a Wendigo. They're not just going to come out and say that, because if they did, they would lose all their business and all their, hikers and everything. No one would want to go to a park where you could get eaten by a Wendigo. So Alex and Steve cut off this recording and they run to the visitor center to try to talk to Nancy, try to calm her down, try to get her to relax. And while this is happening, the park does what any other governing agency would do, and they try to pay her off. They say, take the money, sign the NDA, don't say anything about it, and it'll all be all right. They tell Nancy that John was mauled by a bear, which she obviously doesn't believe, because he worked there for 20 years, and he was an expert tracker and cameraman, and he knew the way around. He would not get snuck up on by a bear. And the ranger that called Steve says to Nancy, quote, "Ma'am, for the last time, I strongly urge you to sign the agreement and take the money," end quote. And of course, Nancy is not gonna want to do this. She's furious. Her husband just died. She then does something that's pretty dangerous, and she starts to claim that John told her what was happening at the park. She says that John told her that there was Wendigos and creatures that we don't understand, and weird anomalous properties and locations, which I'm sure John wasn't supposed to do. But now that she said that out in the open, the park is kind of freaking out. Because if one person outside knows all these weird things and all the cover-ups that they do, then everybody can know. So once again, they try to calm her down, give her the money, sign the NDA, and try to get her out of the park as far away as possible. She kind of had like a little boss moment, if you will. And then the guy was like, I strongly urge you to stop talking, which is just layman's terms for stop talking or we're gonna have to like cover you up too. You know what I'm saying? At this point, Steve rushes in the visitor center and starts taking over the conversation and talking to Nancy himself. Now, Nancy and Steve know each other because, you know, John worked with Steve and they were pretty close. So he's able to calm her down a little bit, and he's able to convince her to sign this NDA for the safety of her and her children. You know, he says they just lost their dad, they can't lose their mom. Steve knows what the Dyer Corporation and what the park can do to cover up stuff, so he doesn't want Nancy to be wrapped up in it, so he convinces her to take the money, sign the NDA, and just to get out of there before anything goes bad. While they're talking, we don't get a visual of what they're saying to each other, but what apparently happens is Steve writes on a notepad what actually happened to John and shows it to Nancy. And of course, Nancy reading, your husband was killed by a Wendigo, that kind of freaked her out of her anger into, okay, wow, yeah, we do need to get out of here. We do need to take the money and hide, and it worked. So W for Steve. The video ends with Steve telling Nancy that if she needs anything, to just call him, and he'll be, you know, one phone call away, and that's where it ends. So I really like this video. It's my favorite one in the series. You know, as I was watching them, it was my favorite, and I still think it might be my favorite, but it highlights real life themes that happen in national parks. Like, this is a real thing that happens. The government tries to pay people off. The government tries to cover up stuff. The National Park Service, really shady. They have things going on inside of them with disappearances and creatures and stuff like that that they don't want the public to know about. A lot of times when a family member goes missing in a park and you ask the ranger service or anybody investigating, they don't tell you anything. Then they hide, you know, evidence, and they just are really tight-lipped about it. And from the outside, that just looks sus. You know, it looks like they're hiding something. I'll link Wendigoon's Missing 411 video in the description below, where he chronicles several disappearances that have happened in national parks. Check that out if you're interested. I'll definitely be doing some Missing 411 stuff, like the lesser known. I've read all the books about it and stuff. I'm really into that kind of thing, and that's why I really like this part of the series. I love how they're playing into this nasty government cover-up, this shadow entity trying to pay people off to, you know, to scrape things under the rug. Anyways, on to the third to last entry number 6. So entry number 6 is a changing point within the series. It kind of mixes things up, changes the flow, and it kind of changes the way the videos are presented. It also does a cool thing, and it introduces another entity. The video is titled Miners, like with pickaxes, were attacked by these entities in 1850. It starts with Park Ranger Alex explaining that back in the 1800s, people would go to the river that's in this park, and they would sift for gold. Apparently there was gold deposits in the river. And while they stayed there, mining and sifting for gold, they would stay on the banks of the river inside of the natural cave formations that were there. There's tons of them in the rocks by the river, just dotted in them. These caves can range from being like massive caverns to small cave entrances. But the problem is, these miners had no idea about the creatures that were lurking inside the caves until they did. The creatures are known as cave critters. They are long, ungainly, gray-skinned humanoids that live inside the caves. Creatures have 6 arms, or appendages, that stick out from different points in their bodies, and they're extremely strong, which gives them the ability to climb up just raw rock surfaces straight up. The good news is that these creatures almost never leave the caves. It's like they're kind of locked inside of them due to them not liking sunlight. The best picture we have of these cave critters is from John himself. It's this image right here, and like I said, John's kind of an OG in this series because he is the best photographer of these entities that we have. As you can see, it looks like a giant spider humanoid thing. This photograph by John was taken way back in 1957, and the last cave critter attack that we have documented is from 1962. That is until the one that I'm going to talk about soon. But anyways, the last big number of attacks was in 62. Alex then goes on to explain how cave critters multiply, how they reproduce, and how they continue their line. And it's through a pretty interesting way. You see, cave critters have a virus inside of their saliva that they transmit to other things and people via biting them. So it's kind of like a vampire. Now, if a person is bitten by a cave critter, you're actually not guaranteed to turn turn into one or to even have anything happen at all. Because the park has something called the 45-45-10 rule, which is pretty much the nickname given to the odds of you getting this disease. There's a 45% chance that you'll just pass away from being bitten, like it'll be too toxic and you'll just not live. There's a 45% chance that you'll become a cave critter, and then there's a 10% chance that nothing will happen. You'll just walk away fine and have a cool scar, I guess. Which means that 10% of the people are just naturally immune to it somehow. If you're infected by a cave critter, for the first couple weeks you won't really notice too many symptoms until like after that second week, when you'll start to display rabies-like symptoms. You'll start to be really erratic, you'll start to foam with the mouth, and you'll just get all like crazy and volatile and very aggressive. In the weeks after these symptoms, you'll start to have this unbearable urge to return back to the cave that you were bitten inside of. It's like it's calling you back home. You have to get there no matter what. And you'll do anything to get back there. You'll hop on a plane. If anybody stops you, you'll slash them. You have to get to the cave. Next in the video, there is a small clip of a man that's infected with the cave critter virus being put down after being strapped up to a chair. He just got shot because he was too dangerous. More on that guy later. There's a whole video about him. Anyways, if a victim that's been bitten reaches the cave that they were bitten in, if they made it back, the cave critters that are fully transformed inside the cave will protect that human until they can transform themselves fully into a cave critter. Because this transformation, it takes about 6 months, so half a year, which is a long time, and there could be rescue attempts made and that kind of thing, and that's why the cave critters themselves, protect that new critter. They don't want them to be taken from them. They protect them until they turn into a cave critter themselves. The cave entrances are closed off by barricades right now, which has decreased the need for, medical attention, and there's been less attacks, which is good, but it didn't help fully. Anyways, that is where entry number 6 ends. So entry number 7 is the second to last clip that we have now. And this is the 7th video, and I'm sure there'll be a ton more. Seriously, this is fantastic. It's titled The Cave Critter Disease Outbreak of 1975. And if you remember from what I just went over in the last video, the only reported, cave critter attack since John took that photo was in 1962. Just 13 years before the start of this analog horror series, 1975. Which means that there is an active cave critter outbreak right now while Alex and Steve are filming these videos. Now this footage of the video off the bat tells us who started this outbreak and how it started. On October 7th of 75, some guy named Todd Harrison, was intrigued by the caves. He was kind of mesmerized by them, and he saw them blocked off and was like, you know what? I got this. I can explore it. I'll be fine. Anyways, he was so intrigued that he jumped the barriers and he started exploring a cave, where of course he was attacked on the arm by a cave critter and he was bitten. Now obviously Todd freaked out and he ran out of the cave, got into his car, drove feverishly out of the park, covered up his cut, and made sure that the park rangers at the gate didn't see it. One of the reasons that he actually left was he thought the park would end him for being bitten as a cover-up, because, the park doesn't have a really good track record for leaving people alive after they're being attacked or after something happened. So he kind of just got out of there before something bad was going to go down, which was pretty smart, but also pretty dumb. Todd then got on a plane to head all the way back to New York, which is a cross-country trip from Washington to New York is literally a long time. So he gets on the plane, he gets back, and for the first week or so, he doesn't really show any symptoms. That's how this disease works. Until that second week, he starts to develop some symptoms. Feeling really sick, feeling off, he goes to the nearest Dyer Corporation hospital, which they secretly ran, of course, and his blood is taken to be sent off for inspection and to be, diagnosed. Of course, the diagnosis comes back, and your boy Todd has gotten the cave critter disease. He wasn't one of the lucky 10%, he's infected. Now, if you remember, the virus takes 6 full months to come into fruition. So he fully won't turn into this gray humanoid being for 6 months. But for now, he does have the rabies symptoms and is very irritable and really just volatile. The doctor that took Todd's blood, whose name is James, calls the park, and park ranger Steve answers the phone. He tells Steve that he's James from Dyer Medical, and then he immediately tells him, this guy, Todd, He's infected with cave critter disease, and he's not in the park. He's on the other side of the country. Yeah, what do I do? James asks Steve if Steve can confirm that this Todd guy was actually in the park, if that was, something that could be the reason why he got bitten. And, Steve looks at the records, and Steve's like, yeah, some guy named Todd, he was here. He bought a day pass for Tuesday, the 7th of October. He was here. That's the guy. And of course, this confirms that there's a man with cave critter disease in New York. Steve then freaks out and is like really mad that he got past security leaving the park without showing his bite, and the doctor says, well, the bite was on the arm, it was pretty easy to cover up, and that's how you didn't see it. And unless Alex and Steve were at the park gates doing strip searches, I think he could have hidden him pretty well. So now I'm going to set up a pretty good timeline of the events that have happened so far that have led up, to this exact event, because this is where the story really starts to take off. The earliest date we get is that the Woodlands National Park area, the river specifically, was used by prospectors and gold miners in the 1850s. So that's when this timeline will start. It was designated as a national monument in 1912, and then it was officially made into a national park in 1939. Park Ranger Steve was born in 1947, and then Park Ranger Alex was born in 1949. John, the cameraman, started working there sometime around 1955, and we get that date because in 1975, when John was unfortunately slain by the Wendigo, his wife said he's been working there for 20 years, and that could be a rough estimate. That could be 21, 22, 19, but I'm assuming it's 20, and if you subtract 20 from 1975, you get 1955. So we're going to say he started working there around 1955. 2 years later, in 1957, John took the famous picture of the cave critter in the cave, and that is the only good picture we have of them right now. 8 years later, Steve starts working at Woodlands National Park in 1965, and Alex starts working there in 1967, 2 years later. Fast forward 8 more years, and Todd Harrison walks into a cave and is bitten by a cave critter on October 7th, 1975. He then flies home to New York, and a couple weeks later, sometime in late October or early November, he goes to the doctor with the symptoms of the cave critter disease, rabies and all that. Then the doctor, or James, waits a full 5 days for some reason after diagnosing him with the disease to call the park and Park Ranger Steve to tell him about the blood work. So now, at most, it's been 15 days since Todd Harrison was bitten, or at least it's been 12. It's somewhere from 12 to 15. The dates are not exact. Anyways, that is the timeline we have so far from all the dates mentioned. If there's more added in the series, and if I make a part 2, I'll fix it, obviously. But after the call with Steve, James sends a team to go find Todd and arrest him, take him into custody before he starts wreaking havoc. They couldn't detain him at the hospital for some reason. Don't know why, but they have to go to his house to find him before he bites a bunch of people. When this dispatch team gets to Todd's house, they find that he's been living in a closet in his basement for the past week or so. He did this to avoid light and noise, since cave critters don't like those things. They searched around Todd's house and they found all the windows covered with cloth, and there was blood in the sink, which is a symptom from cave critter disease. It's like you're throwing up your insides, and it's all over the place. The place stinks like rot and iron, and everything is just completely dark and cold and noiseless. Now, the reason we know this blood is a symptom of the disease is from the person who got bit back in '62, and this was a symptom they displayed. That person was apprehended before they could wreak havoc, so nothing really bad happened. But one of the main symptoms early on is bleeding from your eyes, ears, and nose. Anyways, they find Todd, and that's actually where the video from the guy who was strapped to the chair early on in the series, that's Todd. He goes crazy, he's strapped in the chair, and that dispatch team from Dyer Corporation pulls out the glicky and ends him right there. Rest in peace, Todd Harrison. But this is the final picture that we have of Todd, and it's very unsettling. You can see the blood coming out of the eyes. I think it's cool this series drops those hints in earlier on videos, and then kind of tells us what it is later on. Just a pretty cool thing. But you might think that the outbreak ends there. They completely blew Todd's head off with that shotgun. Well, you actually be sadly mistaken, because the story thickens. Because 6 months later, 2 security guards at an abandoned hospital start to hear noises inside of the hospital. Of course, they do what security guards do, and they go to investigate these noises, only to be ambushed by a creature of some kind inside the hospital walls. One guard saw his buddy, the other guard, be taken by a, quote, large 6-armed humanoid, which is a cave critter, and ripped to pieces. That one security guard lived to tell the tale. The Dower Corporation found him, and that's how we know this. Now, the interesting thing about this encounter is that this cave critter was not in a cave. It was in a hospital. Now, it was nighttime, and it was inside of a building, but the inside of a building is not the inside of a cave. It's very different. I'm wondering who this was and how they were infected. I'm sure it was by Todd, but this was not in Woodlands National Park. This was somewhere else at an undisclosed location. I'm assuming it's near where Todd Harrison's house was. It's not mentioned, but you can assume that. Once the Dower Corporation was, told that a security guard just got ripped to shreds by a cave critter inside of an abandoned hospital, they sent out another dispatch team, because their teams totally have a good track record of doing the right thing and actually containing the anomaly. Anyways, there was 3 men sent in, 2 heavily armed ones with, guns and stuff, and then again, 1 cameraman to photograph the entire thing. And I gotta say, it seems like the cameraman really never does die. I guess that's why they send him in. I guess creatures don't kill cameramen. Anyways, of course, this mission went awry. People were attacked, people were killed, and the video footage itself was corrupted, and only a few stills could be recovered. And you're seeing those stills right now. Most of them seem innocuous and black and just dark. You can't really see anything until you get to the final image, where you can just barely see the silhouette of a pointy-eared head, a cave critter's head, peeking from the ceiling above. Both of the armored guards that were there were bitten and taken into custody to be studied, and the cave critter itself was successfully unalived. So I guess they did succeed, but they both got bit in the process, and the cameraman got messed up. After this, the cover-up began, and this leaves us with now an unalived Todd, an unalived cameraman, 2 infected security guards, and all of that took place outside of the park boundaries. So it's not just inside the park anymore that you can get bit. There could be an unknown amount of infected people outside of the park across the country. The video ends, and it takes us to the final video log of the series that we have so far, with the final video being titled 45 Feet Tall Walker Eats Campers. That sounds cool, right? Now the video opens with Park Ranger Steve telling us how important it is to stay in the designated camping areas, because if you wander off, you might get eaten. He is then interrupted by a radio call from Alex with, again, more disturbing information. Alex is at a park ranger center, and he claims that a man just walked up to him from the woods who is just completely drenched in blood, covered from head to toe in it, and this man brings a really horrifying story. He claimed that himself and his 2 other friends were attacked by a walker off a trail in the woods. The second Steve hears this, he runs towards the camera, turns it off, and he starts running back to the visitor center to hear what happened, to try to go investigate the scene, because this is a live entity attack that just happened. They got to get on it right now to cover it up. Steve and Alex, meet up, and then they go to investigate this trail, and they take off in search of the area where it happened. They do end up finding the campsite, which Alex says is about a mile off the trail. They start searching around the campsite for clues, only to notice that there is no tent there, which is weird for a campsite. But what they do find is a hotbed of coals from last night, and that music player that I was talking about earlier. The guys were just vibing to music. It was still there playing music. That's how they found it. While they're searching the campsite, Alex tells Steve more information on what the man said happened to him and his friends. The bloody guy who walked up to Alex claimed that a walker reached into his tent, grabbed him and the tent. The walker, with tent and guy in hand, proceeds to yeet the guy over his shoulder like 30 feet in the air into the top of a tree like half a mile away. Like, this dude was just free falling in the air, landed in a tree inside the tent, and then proceeded to fall with the tent out of the tree and end up breaking his leg. At this point, we still don't know what happened to his other 2 friends. That'll be later on in the video. But for now, all we know is that this guy was literally just yeeted by a walker, grabbed by one, thrown with him in the tent, like just a sack. Like, imagine just a giant holding a sack with a human in it, and that's what it was. And then he literally just grabbed it and threw him over his shoulder, like falling through the air. Now, this attack is crazy because if you remember back to the original video of the walkers that was earlier in this video, I told you that walkers are typically warded off by fires. And if there's a fire, you're typically safe. That's what you think. Well, these people had a fire, and they weren't safe. Anyways, Alex and Steve, they're continuing to search around this immediate campsite area, and they stumble upon some very distressing signs. They find literally just human remains ripped to pieces all over the trees and the trail right in front of them, and it's just a giant bloody mess. The second they see these remains, they call in a team to come sweep the area, clear the remains, and get the cover-up process started, because they, again, don't want information getting out that you can't walk off the trail in this park. After searching around for a little bit, Steve finds a camera on the ground underneath a tree. While they're investigating this camera, Alex looks up in the tree that's above them, and he sees the tent that the guy was talking about up in the tree. Yep, that's right, the same tent the guy fell out of 30 feet to the ground and broke his leg. Anyways, this camera has the crucial footage that was recorded by these guys of the attack, which is what the second half of the video is about. Let's watch it. So the footage starts with the three guys who are camping. They're walking along a trail, but it's getting dark, and they kind of just want to relax and call it a night early. The nearest campsite's a couple miles away, so one of them proposes to just walk off trail for a little bit of a mile, camp there. It won't be, nothing can go wrong, just a mile off trail, not too bad. Now, the man holding the camera is trepidatious. He says, I'm pretty sure that the park rangers were clear that we should not step off the trail, the designated area, this is not safe, there could be monsters out there. And then, of course, the other two friends do what two friends do, and they make fun of him. You pansy, let's just do it. It's three of us. What's going to happen to three guys? They end up walking off the trail, like I said, about a mile deep. They set up camp. They start this really nice fire. They get the music playing. It's actually a pretty calm vibe. They seem to be just relaxing and chilling, which dudes being dudes. They're relaxing until the music on the radio starts to turn into static. And of course, we know what the static means, but these guys seemingly didn't. A few seconds after they start hearing the static, they hear what seems to be an earthquake, or rather, a sequence of earthquakes. One of the guys says, "There's no earthquakes in Washington, dude." So these guys are, they're thinking earthquakes happening. They think that the ground's shaking. Well, the ground is shaking, but it's not an earthquake, obviously. It's the footsteps of a giant walker nearby. Anyways, they keep hearing more and more crashes, and they start to get freaked out because of these giant rumbling earthquakes that are happening. So all the friends start to walk towards the crash to examine what might be happening. They don't really know, so they want to see. One friend walks ahead of the group, and he starts searching around for a second, and he sees something. And the second he opens his mouth to yell, "Hey guys, there's something here," you can see the flashlight and him be picked up in the air, slammed down on the ground, and just ripped to pieces. You can see his flashlight just go straight up. It's actually really disturbing. These two guys are, freaked out. The guy and the cameraman are just screaming and hyperventilating. They run back to the campsite to get a flare gun and a firearm that they have on them. At least they were prepared for that. And while they're running back, the other guy that's not the cameraman gets grabbed from behind and smashed against the ground. The cameraman, of course, turns around and he examines what just happened, the area around, and he sees both of his friends' remains just on the ground. He sees an arm and a leg and blood everywhere. And since the cameraman never dies, he runs back to the campsite to get to the backpack, to get the flare gun, and he's shaking and hyperventilating. His friends just got smashed by a giant creature that he can't see. He shines his flashlight around, doesn't see anything, and then he just takes one last hope and just fires off a flare into the night in front of him. And this flare just barely illuminates the outline of the walker. Now, the picture I'm showing you, I kind of upped the exposure a little bit so you can see it better, but you can just barely ever so slightly see it from the reflection of the flare gun on it. As you can see, it's a tall, almost invisible humanoid shape that's just really high off the ground. Anyways, the cameraman sees it from the flare, freaks out, runs back to the tent, and dives in, zips it up, and he hopes that for some reason the walker will go away and not attack him. He continues to hear massive thudding footsteps inching closer to his tent. He's hyperventilating, of course. How could you not be? And then finally, the tent crumbles, and he feels himself being picked up off the ground, and then eventually, after being shaken a little bit, thrown 50 feet in the air, landing in the top of a tree around 30 feet up. He gets literally thrown over the tops of the trees to the woods. Now, he's not on top of the tree for a long time because, of course, he falls out of the tent down to the ground and breaks his leg. Somehow, this dude survives, and when he comes to, he looks around. There's nothing out in the woods that he can hear or see. So maybe the walker thought that he successfully killed this guy. We don't know. Anyways, the camera guy proceeds to walk all the rest of the night to the nearest park ranger station, where he finds Alex, and he tells him what just happened. He left the camera back when he fell out of the tree, and that's why he didn't have it on him when he went to the station, and that's exactly where Park Ranger Steve found it. And I'm glad he recorded it, that way we could see the walker in all its horrifying glory. And that is where the story is at currently. The last upload was just over a month ago, and I'm sure they're working on more right now. It's kind of getting more and more popular, but for now, that's the entire series. But it's not really. You see, Alex and Steve, which are their real names as well, have a website, the Buddy Films website, that we can explore and find some more clues and some more interesting hints at things that are happening. Let's check it out. So on the website, we can see the first park brochure for Woodlands National Park, and we can see a little thing under it that was not in the video. This seems to be a cipher of some sort. We see that it's located in the beautiful state of Washington, USA, and that it's open all year round. We can then see meet the head park rangers. It's Ranger Steve and Alex. That's where we can get their birth dates, and then when they started working at the Woodlands National Park. Nothing too interesting here, but where the plot thickens is if you scroll down even further, you can see more information on the creatures. So far in the series, we have cave critters, we have walkers, and we have wendigos. Those are the anomalous creatures that have been sighted and documented and told to us so far in the park. But if you scroll down to the picture of the walker entity that's here, you can see a QR code in the bottom right hand corner, and by scanning this QR code, you'll be linked to a private video with a cipher. Now, using that QR code, we can decipher exactly what this cryptic message here means. See, this brochure says the park was founded by 3193 parentheses 3 exclamation mark tree plus plus Dyer Corporation 6. That sounds like I'm mentally insane, but I promise you it means something. That actually translates to a man named Abraham Woods. So the park was founded by Abraham Woods. Who is Abraham Woods? What does it mean? I don't know, but in the description box of the private video, it says, "Congrats, you found it. You can now expose the park." So we know who started the park back in the early 1900s, Abraham Woods. But me personally, I haven't been able to find anybody that was from Washington or anybody of significance named Abraham Woods that would mean anything. Now, there are other things on the cipher that could be useful in the rest of the series. Maybe we don't have all the information we need yet, but I do think it's interesting, as the one commenter on the secret video says, that the names of the Dyer Corporation and Nancy and John, they correlate with each other's picture. So the N is Nancy's face, the J is John's face, the Dyer Corporation logo is D, and so on and so forth. I'm sure this will be useful more and more as the series progresses, but since we don't have all the videos yet, I can only decipher Abraham Woods is the creator. I don't even know what that means yet. I mean, I've searched. I don't know if you guys have any information on it. Do the comments below, let me know. But as far as I know, the park was founded by Abraham Woods. That's what I've deciphered. The rest of the website is just pretty much more and more of the pamphlets explaining the walkers and the cave critters and the wendigos and things like that. And like I said, I'm sure that more will come. So Woodlands National Park, an anomalous park with crazy creatures, weird government cover-ups, strange diseases. It's all there. I cannot wait for more episodes to come out. Seriously, there's infinite possibilities where this could go. It really tickles all the ARG tickle bone. It just tickles my fancy. It really does. And it really has me on the edge of my seat waiting for more. In all the sense of those words, it really does. I hope my explanations and summarizations didn't sound like hieroglyphics to you. I tried my best to summarize it in a simple to understand way, but like I said, you have to check out the original series to get the full grasp. I absolutely love this series so far, and I just cannot wait for it to continue. It really encapsulates all things that I personally love, that I'm interested in, like the woods and national parks and cover-ups. Also with weird, horrifying entities and creatures that aren't really understood, but they still link back to real-life lore like wendigos and these invisible walkers and stuff. It all just really tickles my fancy bone, you know what I'm saying? And real-life national parks, they're really shady, and I feel like this ARG and this horror series that Alex and Steve have created really do an amazing job of conveying how shady they are and how in the depths and the links that they'll go to cover up things. The real life national parks would never, come out and say, your friend was killed by a wendigo, or your friend was abducted by an alien. They'll never say that. But nonetheless, thousands of people still go missing in them, never to be seen again. And people don't just vanish. There's going to be remains somewhere. The truth is out there, and this series does an amazing job of showing us how that can be done back in the 70s. Plus, I just really like the creature designs and just the filming and everything. It's all just so perfect. I really enjoy it. Seriously, go check out Buddy Films. Watch all their stuff. It's fantastic. I cannot wait to see what they have in store. And I hope that you'll be tuning into their series as it progresses. And if there is more and more that comes out, I will make a part 2. I just wanted to jump on this before. I've seriously been watching it like a ton. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure you all have a lot to say about it, a lot of theories and stuff. Make sure to comment in the comments below. Now, this was a very long video, and I apologize. This is way longer than my normal stuff. But if you want more, drop a like. I'll be glad to do it. Thank you for your support here on this channel. Now, this is my 3rd channel, and you know, it's more of a passion project channel, and I'm really glad that you all have enjoyed the videos I've been posting. Seriously, it's just really been awesome to have this community coming up over here, and I hope you're here to stay. I can't wait to make more videos like this about internet horror and mystery and just all that kind of stuff. I love it. Thank you so much for watching. I love and appreciate each and every one of you. Tell somebody that you love them, because life is too short not to. And I'll see you all in the next video.